I want to talk about a vice, smoking, tobacco smoking. It's one of the world's most widely used drugs. There's no question about that. Varies from country to country, but I think I'm right in saying every country on earth has some form of smoking, even very conservative Islamic states. They may have sections where there's morality laws in place, but even there is derivations of smoking there. So it's along with alcohol, it's one of the world's most widely used recreational drugs. Um, can I call myself a smoker? Well, yes and no. Yes, insofar as I do smoke on occasion, but no in the sense that I don't smoke every day. I can go long periods without it. I don't. So in that sense, I'm not a smoker per se. I mean, I could do without it. Um, Partly for financial reasons because it's got more expensive in this country, but also health reasons, and also um, I want to kind of it's kind of like a test for myself that I don't rely on it. So, for example, the last smoke I had was April the 30th. It's now May the 3rd, and I'm not like dying for a smoke. I could probably go this whole month without it. So that's the sort of situation I'm in. But obviously, is strong properties in it, nicotine and so on, that hook people. And it goes without saying that it costs health systems billions and billions around the world. In this country, it costs over 100,000 deaths a year. Alcohol related illnesses, by comparison, is somewhere between, I think the statistic I saw, the last one I checked, was between 12 and 20,000 a year. So, in other words, smoking is a lot costlier than alcoholism in that sense. However, I think alcohol related diseases and the general social problem causes other issues which you don't necessarily get from smoking. Generally, smokers, don't assault people or get into fist fights or act like louts because of smoking. But that is related to the alcohol problems we have in this country. Anyway, there's a specific thing I want to talk about, which is the stigma around smoking. It's I don't think it's as strong here in Europe, but definitely in the United States, it's something that I've noticed. Um, Not so much from personal experience, but just from popular culture. There does seem to be this tendency that smokers are kind of shunned almost as bad people, in a way that other vices are not. I mean, one thing I've never understood is why calling someone overweight in the United States is, whoa, that's rude. You can't say that, even though America has a serious obesity problem. But if someone is, it seems perfectly okay for someone to be shamed for smoking. In fact, there was a whole storyline in Friends around this. If you recall the episode where Chandler is smoking and all the friends are making him feel bad about it, and then I think he said he kind of slipped out that he stopped dating Monica because she got overweight. Now, it may be a bit tactless, but it just kind of demonstrates there's strange double standards on that. I mean, I don't see any difference between someone smoking a lot and getting lung cancer as a result versus someone binge eating and not having a healthy lifestyle and developing the health problems associated with obesity, which also kills a lot of people from heart failure and other related illnesses. But there seems to be double standards there. Um, the thing I find a little bit galling, so I sort of see two sides here. I think there are some smokers that are in denial. That's true. I think there are some smokers who will say it's all conspiracy theories, oh, there's no harm in it, etc., etc. There is. I smoke, and I'm fully aware that if I do it in excess, I could get lung cancer. I could develop other health problems. So I think it's important that smokers aren't deluding themselves. Smoking is not healthy, whatever way you gloss it over. Now, it may be a certain way of smoking. For example, Richard Anderson, the old Normandy veteran, who's the oldest American man, lived to 113, I believe, 111 or 113. He died last year. He was in very robust spirits for a man of his age. He smoked cigars. But the caveat he always put was you don't inhale it, you puff it out. So maybe that's a good tip to learn from a supercentenarian. It does bug me a little bit that people seem to think that, I mean, I've had it a few times, people saying to me, oh, that's not healthy, you know. And it's patronizing, but it's irritating as well because I can understand if you're blowing in someone's face or just disregarding rules, or disrespecting other people. But we're all adults, and I'm a strong believer in letting adults make their own mistakes as long as they're not breaking the law. I think free thinking adults, should be allowed to make their own mistakes. So someone wants to drink a lot, if they want to smoke a lot, if they want to do other things that aren't healthy, ultimately there is a sovereign choice here. Now, that doesn't mean people can do anything they want. Obviously, if people have families, dependents, then it's selfish to not consider your health. Because if you're leading yourself to an early grave and your wife or your children or your husband, um, it's hurting them unfairly. So I'm not saying that it's a total like people should be allowed to do whatever they want, but I've had people who enjoy drinking tell me, "Oh, smoking's not healthy." Well, neither is excessive drinking. Anything in excess is unhealthy. And even taking health to extremes like OCD or absolutely micro-analyzing every single food that you eat can itself lead to health problems associated with all sorts of eating disorders. And I'm no expert, but this is just common sense. Um, Bruce Lee died at 32, and the guy was a complete health fanatic. He was ultra healthy. So I'm quite a strong believer in balance and just common sense. Don't do anything in excess, but also don't get hung up on micro analyzing what's healthy and what's not, because I think if you do, it saps away just enjoying life. I mean, people may not drink or smoke for religious reasons, or if they're training for the Olympics, or if they're in sports. That's understandable. I respect that. Or maybe certain professions, the military, the police. You need to be obviously physically healthy. Firefighters, but even they wouldn't have a puritanical code. Um, People need to just live and let live. I mean, I never smoke in someone's face. I certainly don't break the law. And if I do want to light up, even in China where smoking is much more widespread, even there I said to friends and colleagues, "Oh, do you mind if I smoke?" And almost always they didn't mind. I assume for because it's just so widespread over there. But I never smoke around children. I never it's all about common sense, but it is a little bit irritating when people kind of tell you the obvious. Oh, that's not good for you, you know. Yeah, I know. I can see the graphic warnings on the packet. Let me just show you a few examples. If you're from outside the UK, there's similar warnings in other countries. This is the sort of things we see in the UK nowadays. Cigars or cigarillos are actually cheaper these days than cigars and cigarettes. Well, cigarettes. So, smoking increases the risk of blindness. That's quite a graphic one. So, pretty graphic visual reminders. But this is excessive smoking. This is like when you're, people who do 3 or 4 packets a day. I mean, one thing I've never got about that is how they afford it, because the actual cost of cigarettes is going up in this country. I fully support the smoking ban, by the way. I do think that there's certain places you just common sense don't smoke. Um, I think it saved lives. I think it saved the NHS money. I think it was a good policy. I remember the old days in the early 2000s when nightclubs used to stink with tobacco. And the smoking ban came into effect in England and Wales in 2007, I believe. So I totally welcome that. What I don't like, though, is how certain non smokers kind of treat smokers with contempt. And I do get this impression that some people kind of treat smokers like they're criminals. Smokers aren't criminals. And if someone wants to light up in their own home, There has been controversy recently, some debate over council tenants lighting up in their own homes and councils forbidding it. Here's the thing, council workers have a right not to be subjected to secondhand smoke, which can kill. But if we're talking about a 20-minute, half-hour meeting, um, I think it's a bit draconian to tell people you can't smoke in your own homes. I mean, even if they're renting it, we all have vices. And I question anyone. I'm a little bit suspicious of someone who has absolutely no vices whatsoever. I think they're a borderline control freak. That's fine if they want it for themselves, but when they start imposing it on others, it does make me wonder. So, all I would say to non smokers is I smoke. I get it. It is unhealthy. But can you honestly, hand on heart, tell me you don't have a vice? Do you? Can you honestly, hand on heart, say that you're super healthy? Maybe you are. So then my question becomes, do you really think that you have a right to go around telling people, reminding them of what they already know? Most smokers know it's unhealthy. But, the world is a stressful, complicated place. People have different ways of relaxing. And just because you relax by going for a walk or listening to music, other people relax by having a smoke. And that's entirely their right. Otherwise, we'll end up in a sort of puritanical state that the Taliban would be happy with. And that's something that I would never support. So I support the smoking ban because I think it has been effective. But I would draw the line about kind of making smokers feel like criminals. And as for politicians not smoking for image, I think that's nonsense. If a politician wants to smoke, they should be allowed to, as long as they're obeying the law. I don't think it should like, oh, this is bad for votes. There's still a lot of smokers out there. I think, incidentally, thinking of prime ministers, I think the last prime minister to openly smoke in this country was Harold Wilson. I don't think Callaghan smoked. Thatcher, Blair, Major, Browning, Cameron, and May certainly don't. Although Cameron did smoke in his youth. Um, but that in itself shows a kind of cultural change, I guess. It may well be in the next 20, 30, 40 years, smoking will totally disappear. And if that's the natural course of things, so be it. But it has to be done gradually, and you cannot criminalize smokers. You cannot, treat people with contempt just because they're doing something that makes them relax. They know it's unhealthy. So is drinking, so is anything in excess. And you know people with like a smoker's cough, you know that they're heavy smokers. And you can smell it on them, especially with cigarette smoke. Not so much with cigar smoke. Um, I barely smoked cigarettes. I smoked a lot in China because it was very cheap. But anyway, that's my thoughts. Do you smoke? How often do you smoke? I'll conclude with this. It's just, lay off the patronizing language, people. It's, if you feel the need to go up to someone who smokes and say, "Well, that's not good for you," what do you think you're going to achieve? They're not going to thank you for it. Don't treat people like children. That adults make their own mistakes. And I appreciate you may have had a relative who died from lung cancer, so you don't touch it then. But it doesn't give you a right to go and tell strangers or other people don't smoke. You know, um, because there's a very strong chance. Well, most smokers know that it isn't healthy, but I think it's really comes down to live and let live. Definitely, excessive smoking is a very serious problem, and people should be aware of that. Should try and get some control on it. And I'm not ignorant to the fact there are addictive qualities in tobacco smoking. As for what are they called, e-cigarettes and all that, I'm a bit skeptical of them. Firstly, the science isn't totally concrete on that. Secondly, there's been reports of them actually exploding in people's faces. Thirdly, they're not cheap. And fourthly, from myself personally, I don't consider myself a heavy smoker, so I certainly wouldn't go down that path. Basically, I buy these when I can afford them on occasion. So a typical tendency for me, I might like have a few of these a month. Then the entire next month, I won't smoke at all. I'll smoke at Christmas, maybe with my dad, who smokes a pipe. It's just live and let live. I mean, any thoughts?